Hello, book lovers, and thank you so much for joining me today on my channel, Gianna and the Book Hunt. I will be discussing today the worst reads that I had in 2021. So just lay back, enjoy this ride with me, take a cup of coffee or tea, or maybe a glass of wine if need be, and let's have a look at what books I have in store for you today. Alright, so if you've seen my previous video, you will have noticed that I want to introduce a new tradition on my channel in my videos. I want to do a would you rather question at the start of each video so you can get to know me a little bit, and it's just like a fun icebreaker within the videos that I do. So what I'll do is I'll take my trusted bowl here and I'm going to go ahead and just pick out a question, which I'm going to go ahead and read out. We have here, would you rather be in charge of deciding how your favorite series ends or how your favorite author's next book starts? This is a bit tricky. I think that I'm going to go ahead and choose to alter the ending. If I think of books which were, or actually series which impacted me in a bad way, left a bad impression on me, it's series which had a bad ending. If a book has a bad beginning, it can still redeem itself with a good plot and good development and good ending. While if it has a bad ending, it's like Game of Thrones, you know? You had this beautifully built world and story and characters and development and plot, and then the ending is it just ruins the experience for you. So if I had to choose, I'll probably go with the latter, where I try to persuade the author to change the ending. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at the list of books that I have for you today. I just have to mention something. Obviously, this is a preferential list based on personal preferences, opinions, and feelings that I had while reading these books. So don't in any way feel obligated to join in on my opinion. If you absolutely love the books that I'm going to mention, that's absolutely fine. And please leave a comment in the comment box below of why you like them. Maybe you can persuade me to continue on with a couple of series that I have on this list. Maybe you can also convince me that I'm wrong in some respects. So just bear that in mind, and please use the comment box below to go ahead and prove me wrong. The first book I'm going to talk about today is Lessons in Corruption by Gianna Darling. It's part of the Fallen Man series, and it's quite a beloved series within the book community. I had heard a lot of things about it, and I saw the cover. It was really stunning to me. The cover model is very gorgeous, so I thought I had to pick it up and see what the hype is about. I really dislike this book. There is no other way for me to go around it. I just really didn't like it. The book revolves around a motorcycle club, and this specific book has an age gap. It's a forbidden, taboo romance between a student and a teacher. And why I didn't like this book is essentially because the characters, both of them, were very unlikable to me. I didn't like Cressida. I didn't like King. King felt like he's a 35-year-old guy, but he's essentially only 18 in the book. He's very protective and obsessive over Cressida. He's very, very jealous also, and he was just very unlikable to me, not very realistic for an 18-year-old guy. And Cressida, I also didn't like her as well. So right off the bat, if I'm not connecting with the characters, it's going to be a very difficult read for me. I also didn't like the insta-love aspect between King and Cressida. This is something that you've seen also in my previous videos that I'm not a fan of, so it just didn't work for me. I gave it 2 stars, and I'm probably not going to continue on with the series, I'm sorry to say. The second book I want to talk about is by L.J.Shen. It's one of her recent standalones that came out this year. It's called The Devil Wears Black. And before I go into the discussion about this book, I just want to tell you my history with this author. I've read all of her books, or most of her books, and I do enjoy her earlier work. And I think that I've been trying to get the same feeling with her recent releases, just trying to pick up anything of hers to see whether it will get me to feel the same way that I felt when I read like the Sinners and Saints series and just other books which made me feel really nice and make me feel like enjoyment when I pick them up. But this hasn't been the case for the previous like 5 or 6 releases of hers, and I'm really reconsidering whether to pick up any of her future books, especially because there is a recent controversy around her as an author, as a person. So yeah, lately it's been bad when it comes to L.J.Shen. This book, I just don't want to give you a synopsis about it because it's obviously not something enjoyable. It's not worth it, to be very honest. I just want to read out an excerpt from my review of it on Goodreads so you can make out my kind of opinion about it. What I wrote is I wondered whether to 1-star this book, and I don't have a single 1-star read on my rated list. This changed this year, and I'm going to explain why just later on in the video. I so hoped to love this book. I was hoping to get a taste of L.J. Shen's previous earlier works. However, it was far from it. The first impression that I got is that this book seemed forced, unoriginal, and very one-dimensional. It had hardly any plot, very badly chosen metaphors, and most of the time, very lazy writing. I'm going to give you an example here. She has a metaphor within the book which says, jealousy is like a fart. Just let it sink in. Jealousy is like a fart. I have a 2-year-old who will probably come up with a better metaphor than that. This is just the epitome of bad writing. So yeah, it just didn't work for me. It's not worth your time. Don't pick it up. That's my advice to you. That's all I'm going to say about this book. The next book I'm going to discuss is my very first 1-star read ever, which is quite unique, if I have to say so myself. I usually tend to pick up books which I know I'm going to enjoy. I do my research well. I take a look at the Goodreads rating, at reviews, at the synopsis. I also tend to pick up books by authors I'm familiar with, as is the case with this specific book. The author is Jodi Malpas, and the book is The Brit. I have read previous works by this author before, and they're heavy on the romance, suspenseful, fast-paced, so I usually tend to enjoy that. And I thought that I was going to love this book as well, but this was definitely not the case. There were a lot of trigger warnings that didn't work for me. I have to say here that I have read a lot of dark romances. I'm a fan of dark romance. I read books which have trigger warnings, which I'm prepared for and can work through. But in this specific case, it just didn't work for me because a female author has written scenes which were, in my opinion, very degrading towards the female character. And that just didn't work for me. It was very upsetting to me. So if you're going to go ahead and pick up this book, please go onto Goodreads, check out the trigger warnings, and see whether it's going to be for you. It definitely just didn't work out for me. Oh boy. I know that I'm going to get a lot of hate about the next one I'm going to mention, but I have to mention it because it was really disappointing to me. This book is one of the most popular romances that came out this year. It's called It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. I think it was actually nominated for a Goodreads Choice Award, so that shows off how popular that book was this year. But it just didn't work for me. I think it was inspired by this Netflix show Schitt's Creek, but I haven't seen it, so I don't know whether that's a part of me not being able to enjoy it. But yeah, it just didn't work for me. The story revolves around this rich, entitled, social media crazed woman, Piper, who at the beginning of the book gets dumped by her boyfriend of 3 weeks. And because she's so scorned with the whole situation, she decides to throw this gigantic rooftop party, which is obviously illegal, so she gets arrested. And as kind of a teaching moment, her stepfather decides to have her move to like a hole in the wall city, a fisherman's city in Washington, where she will need to work in her deceased father's bar. That's where she meets her love interest. But this book just didn't work for me. The main character, Piper, she was so shallow and superficial, and just kind of compare her to Paris Hilton. And it just, I didn't like her character, and I couldn't understand why her love interest, Brandon, would like her, especially because at the beginning of the book when they met, he actually mentioned all of my feelings about her as being his perceptions of her. So I just couldn't understand why he would go from seeing that she's shallow to actually loving her within 2 weeks time. Again, the insta love, y'all, just it just doesn't work for me. Why is there so much insta love in romance stories? I don't get it. So that didn't work for me. And what didn't work for me as well is that I think that a lot of people mentioned that they feel like Piper redeemed herself in the end, but for me it felt like she was still the same person, but just the same person with a new relationship. And that just did not feel like development to me or any type of growth. So I gave this book 2 stars, and I did enjoy. Um, what did I enjoy about this book? Like, yeah, the spicy scenes were okay, were really nice actually, but for a traditionally published book, I was surprised to see that there were so many spicy scenes. But yeah, that doesn't make up for the lack of likability towards the main character. So yeah, it just didn't work for me. I'm sorry if you love this book, but I really hated it. The next book I'm going to talk about is one that really pains me, that I had to give 1 star to, because I absolutely adore the author of this book. The book is called Out of Love, and the author's name is Joel E. Yan. I have read maybe 18 to 20 books out of the backlist of this author, and most of them are 4 or 5 stars for me. So I was really, really surprised that this story didn't work for me, and that I was so frustrated by it that I had to give it 1 star. What I have to say is that this author wrote Look the Part, Undeniably You, When Life Happened, which was just absolutely wonderful. And I was so misled when I went into Goodreads to check out the synopsis of the book and the rating. The rating is, I think, something like 4.2 or 4.3 stars. So I was really like, okay, so this one is going to be a definite 4 or 5 star read for me. And then I went into the book and it was just so disappointing. The main character, the female main character, her name is Livy, I think. I'm really bad with names, I'm sorry. Livy is presented to be this curious, wild child who is a college student. She has just escaped her overbearing father to go to college, so she's kind of exploring her wild side. And she is very intrigued by the neighbor who moves next door to them. And she's, like I mentioned, presented as this curious character, but she's actually very meddling and very presumptuous, very opinionated, which really rubbed me the wrong way. I mean, she is intrigued by this guy, right? And instead of going and trying to get to know him and like ask him some questions or ask him out or whatever, she breaks into his house. I mean, who does that? Who does that? It just didn't seem right that if you're curious or if you want to know someone, get to know someone, that you would go to this length to get to know them. And also, she had so many assumptions about him. She heard a lot of rumors about him, and instead of kind of trying to get to know him, she again believed the assumptions, was questioning him all the time, was getting into fights with him about things that were not true, but she assumed were true. It just rubbed me the wrong way. It just didn't work for me. The only likable character within this story was the man, I think Wilder is his name, was Wilder's dog. So that says a lot about the book, if I have to be honest. So yeah, it really pains me to say I gave this book 1 star. I will continue reading this author's books because she's really a marvelous writer. This one just was just a one-off for me, and I hope that it remains the only one that I didn't like. The next story is the only one that I actually didn't finish. I have to explain that I actually never DNF books, almost never, hardly ever DNF books. This is because I'm very strict with myself. I really try to give a story a second chance to try to redeem itself, because oftentimes after the 50% mark, there is usually a development, so I try to give it a chance. But with this book, it just was so boring and tedious that I couldn't bring myself to just continue with it. I'm talking about Sarah Hogle's Twice Shy. And I do know that this one is also a very popular book. I think it was also nominated for some awards, and there was quite a hype around this book. And I just didn't get it. I honestly didn't. Probably it's because I finished it. I didn't finish it, sorry. I finished about 40 or 50% of the book, and the development started after that. But if by 50% you don't have me intrigued, there is something very wrong. Um, it was boring. It was tedious. The main character, she was daydreaming the whole time. So instead of trying to get to know her in real life, I was reading about her daydreams, which was really, really annoying to me. And she was also a very she was like a doormat. She had this best friend who catfished her, who was treating her awfully, and she never spoke up. She never spoke up also within her workplace when she got treated badly. So I just don't get it. I mean, this book had no redeeming qualities for me. The romance didn't happen until the 50% mark. So I was like, what am I reading here? And it just didn't work for me. So I decided to DNF it. I'm sorry. The last book I'm going to talk about is by L.J.Shen again. It's The Monster, which is the third book within the Boston Belle series. And I have to tell you, I've recorded this kind of snippet maybe like 10 or 50 times because I cannot get the correct way to explain the situation of this book, because it's the third book within an installment, but it's actually a second spin-off of an original series. So however I try to explain it, it just becomes overcomplicated to someone who hasn't read the books before. So I'm just going to keep it simple. The first book off of this series I enjoyed. The second book was a total disappointment. It was horrible. I thought that L.J.Shen couldn't do any worse than that, but then out came The Monster, which was just even worse. It's supposed to be a mafia story about the monster, but there is no monster in this book. Sam is not a monster. There is no kind of attributes to his character which will make him a monster. And he is mentioned to be a monster over 100 times in the book, which just is ridiculous. It's badly written. It's not well thought of, and the main character, who is the female lead, is also very hot and cold. She's this doormat in the beginning, and then she's this badass bitch in the end, and it just doesn't make any sense how that happened in the story. So yeah, it was bad. I'm sorry about the ranting. I'm just over explaining this book because I've recorded this like 100 times, so I'm sorry about this. And yeah, just didn't work for me. I gave it 2 stars, but it's a generous 2 stars because I'm invested in the world and the side characters and everything else surrounding it. It's really actually a 1-star read, but yeah. If you're interested in it, go ahead and take a look at the backlist of the author to check out the other series to see how the reading order is, and then decide whether it's going to be worth your time. So that about wraps up my worst reads of 2021. After all of the ranting that I did today, I think I deserve a glass of wine myself, so I'm going to go ahead and pick up one in just a moment. Thank you so much for sticking with me today. Please comment in the comment box below what you thought about the books that I discussed today. Also, please subscribe to my channel, like my video, and hit the bell notification button if you want to know when my next video will come out. Have a wonderful day or evening and take care. Happy reading. Bye-bye.